He got caught there. Happy Monday to you and Soccer We Trusters. We're going to recap being back-to-back champs of the Concacaf Nations League, which includes Mexico's coach just getting fired, and that's a big no mommies from me for that. And, why don't you just hit like and subscribe, and then we'll get after it. Yes. What is up, everybody? Welcome to Recently Fired. It's Mexico's manager, Diego Cocca's new favorite podcast, because he definitely does not like El Tree right now in Soccer We Trust. I'm Jimmy Trash Can Cream Cheese Conrad, also known as Jim, alongside Hollywood Heath Pearce, also known as the Heartbreak Kid. And like always, we have a great show for you today because we're talking why the U.S. men's national team is awesome, why the process of rehiring Gregg Berhalter was not, and what should our expectations be heading into this upcoming Gold Cup. But first, a shout out to Heath for holding it down by himself on the post-game show. What an absolute beast, Heath Pearce.
What a guy. What a guy. It was actually a lot of fun. But I'm excited to actually play off of each other today.
Yeah, you got to talk for 30 minutes straight. Why isn't that? That's awesome. Usually you have to share the mic with me and Charlie.
You and I, Jimmy, you are the only male in your household, and as am I in mine. And sometimes we just don't get a lot of words in, And so it was good to just let it all out with no interruptions. But the comments were popping off, and I appreciate everybody tuning in and joining us again today.
No, it was great. And I think what I want to speak with you today, because I thought you did a great job of breaking down a big 2-0 win against Canada, is really the themes, the big takeaways from the two games overall. Not only did we really exert our dominance over two teams that we'd struggled with in the past, obviously didn't beat Canada in World Cup qualifying, and at times Mexico does give us some trouble. Maybe not in recent years, but prior to this past game, we'd only actually won 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5. Every game had gone into at least maybe even extra time for us to find that result, or we just got straight up draws. So it was nice to get a comprehensive win in that way. And one of the themes for me, and I really want your thoughts and everybody listening or watching live, and again, we appreciate your support, was the fact that this team clearly loves to play together, Heath. Like there is, I know there's the joke, all the vibes, and well, no, there can't be vibes there if Christian Roldan's not on the team or whatever the low-hanging fruit is there for the jokes. But there is something about this team where they just love playing for each other. And that, I think, supersedes anything else that's out there. We can talk tactics. We can talk about individual player performances. But when you have a group of players that are willing to play and sacrifice and suffer for each other, that ends up being much more important. That makes all the other tactics and everything else that I just described, it gets amplified, right? Everything just seems a little bit cleaner. The guys are working for each other. They're doing the thankless work. And ultimately, and we saw it definitely in the Mexico game, and obviously we saw great elements of it against Canada as well, that lends itself to making the plays that need to be made at the right time. And it really kind of sets the tone for, we're going to win this game, and there's nothing that this other team can do about it. And the more that we can bottle that up and demonstrate that we have that quality every single time we step on the field, we are going places, Heath Pearce.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say about that, Jimmy, and I fully agree, is that doesn't come overnight. That came over 3 years, right? Of winning, of losing, of trials and tribulations, of good times, of bad times. And that, I think, is where there's a lot of context missing in the soccer landscape of all these criticizers out there of what it takes to build a special group. And nobody is above the law in the special group, right? And I'm not going to go down the route of the Gio thing and whatever. We've covered that so much. The reality is we have never said anything, but Gio likely has the most upside of any player in our national team pool before Balogun. Maybe Balogun does. But generally, we've all said he is the future star. When you saw him against Mexico in that game where he dribbled past 11, you could see all of it, right? But how you build a special group, and we spend most of our time in club environments, Jimmy, and you know how it is, right? You could have the same group first half of the season, crap results, crap attitudes, crap coaching, whatever these things is, but either for or against the coach or I guess whatever it is, you come together and you build something special out of going through tough times. This team is now qualified for a World Cup, played in a World Cup, won 2 Nations League, won a Gold Cup with a wider pool of players. And now we're getting to that special A group. And that's what makes it special, right? If all of that went wrong, Jimmy, these guys aren't just going to be like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. I want to play for each other. It's the national team. We saw that in 2018. Okay. Right. We've always had a special group of players that love playing for the national team. but you become special when you look back and you go, oh my gosh, we're actually doing this. Oh my gosh, we got a result against England. Oh my gosh, we got out of our group. It doesn't matter how confident we are, where these guys play, or how big of players they are. There's always a little bit of that doubt. And until you prove yourselves as a group, and until you look to your right and your left and you go, oh man, I just got burned on the wing. And guess who came through? One of my teammates laid a guy out for me. Or when I got pushed in the back by a teammate and somebody comes over the top and pushes them back, that's when you build that camaraderie. But it doesn't just come from vibes. It comes from being on the field and being through good and bad times together. And that's what's leading to this group being special now.
Yeah, and I think that people are going to obviously try to link that positive or negative with regard to Gregg Berhalter's influence. He definitely has some influence. We can't take anything away from that. I do think that there's a conversation that needs to be had was this going to happen anyway for this particular group? They're the ones on the field that have to make the plays. They're the ones on the field that have to take whatever tactics and information that have been given and go apply that and execute on this. And they've done that to great effect, as you mentioned. I'm really excited about this group. I think the addition of Folarin and Balogun is immense. You know, just his little movements, the wanting, the confidence, like he wants the ball. You're going to give him the ball. There's no doubt that he's going to do something with it. I think those, I don't want to say vibes, but those intentions from Balogun, I think makes such a big difference in terms of what he's looking for and the angles that he's trying to create, the space he's trying to create, and how that can open up opportunities for himself or for others, and obviously a very well-taken goal against Canada. Another thing that I thought we did really well, and I spoke about
Jimmy, hold on. I want you to finish that thought. But Carol somewhere in England said, hey, we got a result against England. Whoa, it was a 0-0. That's England were one of the favorites to win the World Cup. We were thinking about how we were going to get out of the group. I think a 0-0 is a result in a World Cup. Anyways, go back, Jimmy. Finish your thought.
No, I just want to state for the record that Heath has been triggered by the comments less than 7 minutes into the show. I know that's not a record. Charlie still has the record, but
upsets me, Jimmy. Upsets me that we thought we were going to get Pep Guardiola. That we thought the options were going to, how spoiled are we as Americans to think that we're just going to get to the round of 16 in a World Cup and be like, well, we got this golden generation. We're going to get this best coaches in the world, and we're going to get the best players in the world. That's just, anyways, it was a result.
No. I mean, it's funny because I was thinking about this the other day, as I do by myself walking around, and we talked about France, right? And how they're just a factory of just producing all these world-class players, and their U20 team, I'm going to use them as an example. They're the favorites to win the U20 World Cup. Dudes didn't even get out of their group. Right. So it's just not that easy, to your point. I'm backing you up here. It's just not that easy to have success in these types of competitions. And I do think a 0-0 result against an England team that was favorited to win it was an important result for
it gives you belief.
A lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
Belief. And also, I think we created the better chances in that game. Weston McKennie had I don't want to say a sitter, but it was close to being defined as a sitter, and he hits it over, right? If he scores that, it's a different game. Now, that said, if England's down 1-0, I think they come and get a little bit more thirsty on the attacking side and maybe take some risks that could lead to them having success or to us counterattacking.
But that's what we wanted. That's what we wanted against Canada, right? First 10 minutes, it was dicey. We couldn't find any space. Our midfield three were having trouble getting through the lines, and that's the start of any game of consequence. But we got the early goal, and we never get that with the national team in a big game, right? It always takes forever, it seems like, to get a goal. And once that happened, then Canada has to decide, do we send more numbers forward?
How are we going to adjust?
How are we going to adjust? And that's where the game started to open up. They settled back a little bit. We started to be able to play through the midfield. And that's where we started to see our star players like Gio Reyna get the ball in better spots as opposed to three guys up his back and he's having to play negative the whole time. We're starting to those just that triangulation started to come to life because we earned the ability to play through the midfield after getting that first goal.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things at play here, and we'll talk about Balogun here, but he actually had a bit of a soundbite after scoring his first goal for the U.S. men's national team. So, producer Des, let's roll that clip, please.
Take time to build relationships with my teammates, but I don't doubt myself. I mean, I saw Gio with the ball. I know his quality, and I just made a short run in behind. It was a great slide pass, and then I was just able to do what I normally do. And I mean, yeah, I'm just delighted that it helped us to be able to win this game today.
And I'm delighted that you scored, Balo, because you're an excellent player, and I think the movements that you're making make a big difference. Now, I did see a comment there from Spicy Pineapple about Balogun and his movement in the attacking third. I think there's a couple things at play here. One, we had more attacking players on the field, Heath, right? We have Gio Reyna playing centrally. I think that is something we've been clamoring for a very long time on this podcast, and I think you mentioned that yesterday on the post-game show. And I wonder if BJ Callahan actually listens to the pod at times. But there's also something funny about BJ Callahan, right? He was the interim to the interim after Anthony Hudson left.
By the way, Jimmy, hold on. They're welcome.
No, go ahead.
Okay,
go ahead.
I met BJ in a coffee shop months ago.
You did.
And now here we are, champions of the Nations League. You tell me what else we need to do. We've done everything. We've done Balogun. We did Balogun. Okay. We won. You just won the Nations League because of my coffee meeting with BJ. We
definitely recruited Balogun. We were on that. Like that was one of the purposes.
We did one thing before that as well, but I can't remember what it is.
You know what?
I mean,
we deserve more credit than
we're also humble. We're also humble. So
very humble. Chuck being the most humble of all of us. But I think what's interesting is if you're the second assistant, you have ideas as a coach, right? Even though you obviously have to be beholden to the top assistant and of course to the head coach, and you have your role within that coaching staff, but you still have your own ideas. Now I know BJ Callahan has never been the head coach of anything at any point in his life or whatever, but he's not too far removed from that and that responsibility and talking to players and knowing how to get the most out of them. He's so close to that, so there wasn't like that big of a jump in my humble opinion. But he had ideas, and I think some of the ideas. He had this opportunity now to be like, I'm going to just play more attacking players. I'm going to put Gio Reyna central. And maybe that's something he always wanted to do, but never had the courage to tell Gregg, or Gregg was like, no, this isn't the time. If he did have the courage to say something and Gregg was like, no, I'm feeling MMA in midfield instead, or whatever it may be. And I actually think you made a good point the other day that maybe MMA is dead. That might not be the way for us moving forward because we need that extra attacking player.
At times. I don't want to say unilaterally.
Sure.
Like,
yeah, okay, that's fair. You don't want to say it unilaterally. But what I would add is, what I really loved about this particular group of players, when you have more attacking players on the field and attack-minded players, you have Dest and Anthony Robinson and Scally, whoever's out there, they're looking to play forward. They're looking to take their first touch forward. Everything is trying to get into that space, and they're very good at breaking down players 1v1. So when you get enough of a creative space, we'll take Gio Reyna as assist to Balo. He finds himself in a good spot by attacking that first touch he takes into the space, and nobody steps to him. That's it. They're dead. Canada was dead at that point. Balogun obviously makes a very smart run and has a great finish. But we needed more of that. We saw it against Mexico. We saw it replicated against Canada. And this is a Canada team that I have a lot of respect for. They have an identity. They have confidence. They know who they are and what they're about. And yet they still struggled with us in those pockets of space. And I thought that was tremendous. Now we're going to run into an opponent that knows how to stop that stuff. And now we're going to have to adjust. And that's going to be that next evolution for the team. Can we solve that in real time and not have to wait till halftime or after the game to be like, well, next time we'll try to unlock it? Can our players figure it out in real time? And I think we have the talent to do that.
Yeah, the team and quite frankly, Gregg, right? I think there was I think, and I said this yesterday for everybody mentioned, I'd be looking at these games and saying, look, this is how the team is capable of playing. You can take this risk. And now we never had a Balogun before. And so we struggled to get the ball to our strikers. Balogun knows when to track back, when to get his touches, but those little darting runs, putting Gio Reyna in a spot where, if you watch him play at Dortmund for the last couple of years, is always better when he's in combination play, right? When he is running at defenders and people are spinning off.
What's interesting. I'm going to cut you off. What's interesting is that's what we loved about Ricardo Pepi, right? Or you in particular. Like he looks to combine. The combination play is what he's looking for, but it just feels a little bit different with Balogun in there. And it's interesting that the fine margins between individuals and what they bring in their attributes.
Balogun's change of pace in tight areas, that explosive 2-3 steps on a little diagonal run, right? To just slow, go. And to have a player like Gio Reyna, that if you just watch that ball back again, the ability to be on the run, and Serginho Dest played the same one against Mexico, to play a weighted ball that's going to eliminate defenders, but die in the run of a player is unbelievable, right? It is not, that is not a skill set that you just see or whatever. It is a world-class capability to be able to do that. And we've seen Gio do that consistently when he gets minutes and when he's not injured and whatever at Dortmund. And to have him in a spot where he's able to do that, and then a striker who can make those runs. I think Pepi brings other players into the game. I think his hold-up play is good. I think he's active, but that 3-4 steps when you're playing against a low block, even those little darting runs that pull defenders in and out of places, we haven't had that before. And I think Balogun just brings another level of that.
And also, there's just something about you've been around it, where if you're around a player that has a certain level of quality, I don't know how to explain it other than you just marvel at it. You just like, I know what I can do and what I can give to this particular player in terms of service, especially an attacking player, and what he can do with that service. Even like, when you play somebody a ball, I mean, I had a chance to play with John O'Brien. I'll use John O'Brien as an example. Unbelievable, right? With his feet, either side. I could fire him a ball at his shin and he'd be like, no problem. He'd be like, it's like he's smoking a cigarette, It's just, he brings it down. No. And then he makes he's got 3 options and he makes the right pass out of that situation. Mm-hmm. And when you're around players that have that type of quality, it changes how you look at the game and how you think you're going to attack. Now, I think that Ricardo, in fairness to Ricardo Pepi, I think he has it. I just think that Balogun has it more consistently. You're going to see it from him more consistently than you would with maybe some of our other younger players who are talented, but are they showing that on a consistent level? And I think that's what Balogun has in spades at the moment. And then you got confidence, man. Confidence is a hell of a drug. And I think that we played on the front foot. That's another thing I wanted to bring up. I had it written down in my notes. What I loved over these 180 minutes against our 2 top rivals in CONCACAF is that we played on the front foot the whole time. And even when we didn't have the ball, it didn't really feel like we were threatened. Did Canada have 1 or 2 looks? Sure. Did Mexico? Not as much.
They had a few in the second half, but we were up 2-0, and that's the way it kind of goes. You got to just hold on. But they had a few decent, really decent.
But yeah, overall though, I didn't feel like I wasn't sweating it, right? I was never nervous watching these 2 games. And so that's a great sign. And so I'm excited. Now, obviously for the Gold Cup, we're going to be moving into another team. And we're going to get into Gregg Berhalter right after our first break and the rehiring process and Oguchi Onyewu going on to CBS Sports Golazo and Morning Footy and talking about kind of that process a little bit and the way forward. And then we'll hear from Gregg himself in his press conference. But the Gold Cup, what are your expectations for the Gold Cup? I know we'll obviously have plenty of time to break down this whole tournament and everybody that's involved. But what are your expectations given what you've seen from this Nations League group?
Oh, I mean, we should win the Gold Cup. Obviously, it's a different. I mean,
but a whole different set of players.
Different set of players, but we did that with a whole different set of players in the last Gold Cup.
We did.
And so I think you have to prove that we've got a deep enough pool, and those players who I think are probably looking at this team, right? If I'm Mark McKenzie, for example, even though he's not going to the Gold Cup, but he had some injuries that I think. Shoulder injury or something in the last game. But if I was him and I was going into the Gold Cup, I'll use him because he's not. I would look at the Nations League and I would be so excited for this team, but I'd probably be a little heated inside, right? Of saying, right. I've now got, instead of 2 games where maybe I got a few minutes, maybe I got to start, I've got potentially 6 games to prove I'm good enough or I'm not. Now, I'm not saying prove you're good enough to fans, because we know that this group that's being called in to the Nations League, there's a lot of people that just don't like certain players that play in Major League Soccer, and that's fair enough. They don't have to. But I think when you look at this roster, you've got enough quality of players that have a chance to prove something, right? To continue to knock on the door. When I think about players like, obviously you've got Sean Johnson, Gaga Slonina, and Matt Turner. You're going to get Matt Turner probably those minutes in that one.
I honestly hope that Slonina gets some minutes, with all due respect to Matt Turner.
I think this is an opportunity to move Matt Turner, right? I think this is an opportunity to get him a move this summer. And so more minutes, get him those consistent minutes, because he's going to go back to Arsenal and sit on the bench if he doesn't go on a loan somewhere. But when I think about this team, there is enough quality to continue to move things forward and try to win this Gold Cup and broaden or deepen our player pool. When I think about guys that I like from this Gold Cup, Mihailovic, I like Aiden Morris. I like Cade Cowell based on how he played in the U20 World Cup. Can he do that at an international level when the speed is a little bit higher?
Yeah, right.
Zendejas. When I think about the back line, Miles Robinson, Brian Reynolds is a big one that I want to see from him. Jalen Neal's another young player, didn't go to the U20 World Cup, but I think could
John Tolkien.
Potentially.
We don't necessarily have a lot of depth at left back.
Yeah, and he's been solid. I think he's got a lot of upside as well. But those are the types of players. Gaga Slonina as well. If it wasn't about getting our number one, the move that I think I'd like to see him get this summer, I would say for sure he's another one. And so there's a number of these players that I really, really like, and I think can have a coming out party at this Gold Cup to put a lot of pressure in our player pool, right? There was a number of guys that weren't used in this 23 or whatever the number was for the Nations League. that they should be knocking on the door to say, hey, first I'm going to get into our A squad, and then I'm going to try to knock somebody off of their position. And there's a long ways to go, I think, in these groups, but yeah, I like it.
No, I like, it's obviously a huge opportunity, and I still kind of laugh when people get upset about, the roster we're bringing. We now have this Nations League competition that's now, for better or for worse, being dedicated to our A team. And now we have this Gold Cup, which, yes, you want fans to buy tickets and they want to see our best players, and I get all that. I have nothing but respect for that. But I think also it's a huge opportunity to see what else we have in meaningful games. Everybody, doesn't like the January cupcake camp that you and I needed to kind of showcase to the coaching staff.
I didn't need it. You needed it. I didn't need it. You needed it.
I needed it. Well, you didn't need it because you were already through the system in some ways, but I needed it. And so it has a special place in my heart, but I think it's a big opportunity for some of these guys to demonstrate, to your point, can we knock off somebody a little bit ahead of you? Anyway, we'll get into more of that in the Gold Cup on Thursday's show, but I did want to tiptoe into those waters a little bit because I still think it's a big opportunity for a lot of guys. All right, we're going to take our first break of In Soccer We Trust. When we come back, we're going to talk about the resurrection of Gregg Berhalter and his second coming as the U.S. men's national team coach. So don't go anywhere.
And how about this? Get ready for non-stop action that will have you say, "You gotta be kidding!" Oh my, Canada! What a play and what a finish! That's a pretty good football, eh? He's gone all the way to the house. It's the Canadian Football League, Friday on CBS Sports Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back to In Soccer We Trust. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Hollywood Heath Pearce and Charlie Davies. He's busy. He's in Vegas. He's probably at the tables right now, blowing off some steam after putting in a long week of some good work there in Las Vegas. All right, so Heath Pearce, let's talk about Gregg Berhalter and the rehiring process. We actually we saw on Morning Footy that Oguchi Onyewu, our former teammate who is now working with U.S. Soccer but with Matt Crocker, he revealed that Gio Reyna was not consulted ahead of the rehire. Does that surprise you? I mean, there's a part of me, and I'm trying to raise my kids this way, that nobody owes you anything, right? That you can't walk around with entitlement, that, this is getting into the dad stuff. Hey, Father's Day was just yesterday. Okay. Relax, everybody. But that nobody owes you anything. And that was hard for me coming out of retirement. I thought, I'm going to get a job for sure when I retired. I played in a World Cup. You start thinking about all the things you achieved, and everybody's like, oh, that's great. But you actually don't or aren't qualified for what we need in this particular position, or you don't have enough experience to coach at this particular level, or whatever it may be. And that's a harsh reality. And so when I think, should Gio Reyna have been consulted about Gregg Berhalter? No, I do not think that at all. I don't think any of the players really ultimately should be consulted. I think U.S. Soccer. Okay, maybe you can talk to the ones that Tyler Adams, Christian Pulisic, maybe Matt Turner, those types of guys that are going to be part of the 2016. But I don't know. I just think it's an interesting question. So I kind of curious. Do you think he should have been consulted on this?
Not consulted. I think
given a heads up. Hey, by the way.
I mean, maybe at a certain point, yeah. But the reality is there's a lot of healing that's got to happen, right? There's a lot of mending that needs to happen, and that needs to happen naturally. You can't force that. Jimmy, you and I have been with plenty of coaches. I would say 50% of the coaches I played for, I did not like. And I probably have a broken relationship too.
We want names. Give us names.
We'll leave the names out. We'll share names on another day. But you and I have both been through coaches where you just got to get on with it, right? Maybe you disagree with the tactics. Maybe you disagree with the systems. Maybe you had a falling out with them. And there's a time for that. And sometimes you have to be able to have two people open-minded, willing to come together. This is not about Gio, by the way. This is about, like, the Gregg thing is about the Reynas. It's not about Gio in my book. The part that's hard to overcome is the Reyna Berhalter dynamic, because they were so close. They were family, basically. That falling out is different than Gio being a young player who's immature, who didn't have the right attitude, who I think, again, wasn't playing at Dortmund at times because there were players doing the work or playing better than him. We saw a different Gio in this camp. That was a new Gio. His body language was great. His willingness to do the work off the ball was great. When he got the ball, he was magical in the ways that we know. That's the Gio that you want. That's a Gio that's growing up, right? He's a kid. He was a teenager.
He's still a kid, to be honest.
Yeah, he's for sure. And he'll be a kid for quite a while. But these are things that you go through that help you to grow up and mature in certain ways.
Sure.
And I hate to say this, but a young star like Gio Reyna is not a normal kid. He does not go through a normal high school. He does not go through a pathway where you develop certain skill sets and certain things. It happened to a lot of our young stars, right? You are a unique person that's lived in a very small bubble, and your world is a very tiny world. Gio's growing up. The time for them to come together is going to be naturally when they bring it together. That's going to be people on Gio's team, basically having that conversation with him. That's people on Gregg, and they need to come together. And Gregg, being the one in position of power, needs to lead that or leave the door open for that conversation to happen. You can't force it with Gio. You can't give him an ultimatum, but the time will come when they come together. So consulting them, I think, again, letting players know, or consulting players and saying, hey, do we hate Gregg? Like, is there no turning back from this? Or, I think that's important. But for Gio himself, like, that is a natural thing that I think is going to come together. Yes, Gregg made the mistake. I know people are saying of airing the dirty laundry, but we are now in this place that it will naturally happen, and it's going to happen through results. It's going to happen on the field through getting on with it, and then it's going to happen on a personal level, and both of them being open-minded and open-hearted about how we're going to be able to move forward.
Okay, before we get into whether Gregg should have contacted him at any point during these last 6 months, let's hear from Gregg Berhalter himself. He actually addressed this part of the conversation with Gio Reyna. So let's take a listen.
And the commitment to coach him like I coach every other player. And I want to get the best out of him. We want to get the best out of him. And we know that if we can unlock his talents, he's going to be a game changer for this program. So there's work to do, and part of it is working together with Matt and trying to rebuild a relationship that we know will be important moving forward. Yeah, so with Gio, I think the most important thing for him right now is to focus on playing in a final and winning the final. I can imagine after that he'd want some vacation, and that's not meeting with me is not the priority. It's for him to get rest and prepare for the upcoming season. We'll have time to do that. It is a priority, but we'll have time to do that before the September window.
Gregg sounds good.
All right, so we're here there from Gregg Berhalter. Sorry for the volume being a little bit low for everybody watching on YouTube. We'll get that fixed in post for everybody listening in podcast form. So I think it's interesting that he, in some ways, I guess it's not. I mean, if there was some, I'm kind of back and forth, right? I'm sitting on the fence here. I get why he would probably want to not have any contact with the Reyna family. But as it became clear that he was going to take the job, and I guess this all happened pretty quick, according to JT Batson, who the president of U.S. Soccer, said we kind of didn't really make a decision on Gregg until last Tuesday, just a few days prior to the announcment.
They didn't want to announce. We forced them to announce, like the media forced an announcement to avoid the chaos. It wasn't ideal timing, but it leaked, and so.
Yeah, you got to get it. Yeah, you got to get it. You got to figure it out at that point. I don't know. I guess I got to sit with that a little bit more, and I'm sure that's not the answer everybody wants to hear. With regard to reaching out to Gio, maybe it would have. I don't know. I don't know how you do that. I feel like that is more face to face. I guess that's where I'm kind of hung up. A text. I know the kids of today that's how they handle it. That's how they communicate now, is through texting. Like, I've dealt with some players in my coaching side of stuff, and they would rather text than to get on a phone, for sure. And definitely face to face is probably third on that list. But I think that there needs to be a face to face in this one. And if he didn't get the opportunity to do that, and obviously he's found some reasons as to why he's not going to, whether to prepare for these games or to give Gio some rest, I can see a little reluctance to try to address that and let kind of Gio focus on being a player first. But yeah, it's an important relationship to mend, and I think that's very clear based on his statement.
Can I just say something? I am really disappointed at a few players that played professionally, that played for the national team, that have been out there spending the last few days completely stirring the pot on Gio. Right? That Gio played well. Like, oh wow, who would have thought this guy's good?
We want names.
Give us go names. On the internet and you can find them. I think it's just a really crappy, cowardly way to handle things by just being like, oh, look at Gio, as if they weren't watching a Gio with an attitude at the World Cup. Gio now is a completely different Gio. Gio is one of the best players on the field. He's unbelievable. But the way in which you bring this back together, again, to go back to that question, you can't call. And Gregg can't just show up at his door because it's more than just Gio and him, right? There is a lot of familial stuff. There's probably some betrayal of that coming out that Gio feels. There's some betrayal in the way that basically Claudio Reyna has been shamed by the soccer community for the things that he did. That's his parents, right?
Right.
And you don't just go like, oh, Dad, you really let me down. I'm mad at you. No, that's your parents. And there's a lot of nuance in that and a lot of hurt that goes with some of that stuff and having your name thrown around for months by the media. Okay. And so there's a lot of rebuilding that has to go beyond all that. And it does have to happen in person. And it needs to happen with probably some mediation. And it needs to happen with getting on with it and coaching a player in a camp. That's one thing. But to make it a personal relationship again, that's going to take some work. And so I think a call or a text is just impossible. Like you have to go through the right channels.
You do
to rebuild that. If I had gone through something like that with anybody, take soccer out of it. It's not just as simple as picking up the phone and being like, "Hey man, like how do we get past this?" Right? There's a lot that has to go into to something like that. And I just think to put it on US Soccer, to put it on Gregg, to put it on the Reynas or Gio, it's just too much. You have to follow a process.
Do you think that
go through all that?
Put on your psychological or a psychiatrist hat on. Do you think that Gregg needs to start with Claudio first? Like, I mean, obviously there's so much that we don't know. I think that's probably happened behind the scenes that maybe have made this thing worse, or maybe a lot of it's being over amplified in the media. I don't know, whatever it may be. But I wonder if that's the first place, like the parents or Gregg and his wife kind of have a come to Jesus meeting with the Reynas, and then that positivity or whatever comes out of that might be able to ease any kind of pressure or tension that Gio is facing. Because I do think there's going to be some tension. Ricardo Pepi's much different situation, but he hung up on Gregg when he got told he wasn't going to be on the World Cup roster. That's another one to mend. I know Pepi's come out and said some things being positive about Gregg and what's behind us is behind us. I'm paraphrasing there, but the Gio thing is obviously a lot more complicated. And as we've already seen the evidence there, when you put him central and when he's motivated to play and he's ready to go, and we see this new version of him with his bleached hair, which is awesome. I think he's excited to play for the national team, be around this group of guys. And I don't think we should take that away from him. So it's going to be a really important relationship for Gregg. And when I watched that press conference, Heath, I wonder when Gregg's sitting there going, I wonder if there's any moment like, maybe this isn't the job that I want, because it's going to be hard, man, because this is his second time around. The expectations are higher. As you mentioned earlier and yesterday in the postgame show, all of these players have gone from kids, and some of them are grown-ass men now, right? They've won things. They've seen things. They've been around. They've experienced highs and lows. They're learning how to navigate the high seas of social media and all these things. And so their responsibilities and what they can take on, you don't have to hold their hands anymore. They're ready. And so now you just kind of have to get out of the way, put them in a good spot. And I think that's what BJ Callahan has done. He got out of the way, puts a lot of good players on the field, put them in a nice, relatively, simple, but the guys were up for it, right? The energy was good, playing on the front foot, having ideas, having risk-taking decision-making, all that type of stuff. And so I wonder if Gregg can get out of his own way. And I think that's going to be the big challenge for him in this second cycle.
Yeah, I think it is. Again,
I mean, what are your expectations for Gregg going? What would be your reasonable expectations for Gregg this time?
Again,
around?
I go back
to
any
fan stuff out of it.
I go back to the comments that Gooch made on the show yesterday on Morning Footy. And he talked about making sure that they can help Gregg to grow and improve as a coach and putting people around him that can help him to grow as a coach. Gregg lost 2 coaches to Major League Soccer jobs throughout the process. He'll probably lose BJ at some point, who's clearly going to be attractive to some people unless he wants to stick around. I think he's phenomenal. Obviously, also the greatest dressed manager on a sideline ever with his polo shirts. The only thing that was missing
he should get off. Go ahead.
The only thing missing from his dad core outfit was to rock those pants with some flip flops. And then I would have been like, dude, this guy is straight on vacation mode. He is in Cabo right now, at the all you can eat, all you can drink resort. having a good time with his polo on. And I love him for that.
If and when he wins the Gold Cup, and I hope that happens, and he wins every single. I mean, the guy would be undefeated over 8 games or whatever, and I would just bounce and be like, it's not going to get any better than this. I'm out. Who wants to pay me a buttload of money to coach in MLS?
He's going to go to Saudi Arabia and get that big job
with Anthony Hudson.
Follow Anthony Hudson.
Well, everybody just follow the money trail, dude. Follow the money trail. But
no, but Jimmy,
continue
real quick on the expectations, he has to move this team along. He has to be willing to adapt his style a little bit more. I think that his rigid tactics, or maybe the over sort of analysis of the way in which they want to play, has to evolve. But this team has evolved. And so he has to put more trust in these players moving forward. He has to give them more responsibility and accountability, and not feel like he was 3 years ago when most of these players had zero experience. And he felt like he needed, and I'm speaking just purely from what I observed, like he needed to hold their hand through a lot of these moments. You've got to put a lot more on these players to say, you know what? These guys have been through it all now. These guys are phenomenal. These guys have so much talent. These guys have proven it in a lot of ways. Then you look at going out with an attacking lineup, taking risks. All these things I think need to now put more on the players and less on him, to where he can take more of a secondary role and challenge himself and put people around him that are going to challenge him constantly and challenge the status quo to move them forward. Again, this team is so different than they were a few years ago. A lot of that is because of, and we can say it's not because of Gregg, that they were good enough to be called in the national team and any coach would have called them in and blah, blah, blah. But clearly they've endorsed him. And Jimmy, you and I have been through enough coaches again that you can easily just spin an answer and be like, yeah, we're excited. Now we've got a coach, we can move forward. Or yeah, we're, he did pretty good with us, or you can say, you can see all the subliminal messaging that happens when players speak. And I know former players again are like, well, what were they supposed to say? You're just stirring the pot. These players they're all media trained. Have an interview with them. You could say nothing, but they literally said the right guy for the job, when you could have just been like, cool, we got a coach now, we can move forward. Or, we're excited about what happened and what could be. Like, there were actual endorsements, which means players have some level of relationship with him. And now he needs to pay them back with respecting or trusting those players to do right by him moving forward and give them more trust and accountability.
I think it's interesting that there is some emphasis from U.S. Soccer to help him improve as a coach. They had to be aware during this, I'm going to put air quotes up, rehiring process. Because I think we just wasted 6 months of time.
I agree. It was a crap rehiring. It was a crap rehiring process.
Totally. It's comical in a lot of different ways. The fact that they hired an outside firm to then hire Gregg Berhalter. I mean, how much do those guys get paid? And can they give the money back? Because I don't think they did really anything at all with regard to that. I feel like there should have been some stipulation there. If we hire the same guy, we get our money back. But I think it's interesting because the second cycle for the same coach has never gone well here in the U.S. I wonder, and I appreciate from Matt and Gooch that there's going to be a process. Now, I do think that Gregg should be coaching the Gold Cup. I think it's interesting that he's not. I wonder because, I get into my speculative, is it because there's a B team and if they don't win, then it's not going to look good for him or whatever, whatever we want to throw into that.
But what does it matter if it looks good for him? Like, US Soccer doesn't care what we think or what the fans think.
I get that
of the coach.
I'm just saying it's interesting that he would pick it up. Anyway, we just wasted the time. He should have been in charge this whole time if they're going to stick with him.
No, but Jimmy, I will say on that.
Go ahead.
They weren't planning to announce his name until after, right? And it'd be weird to just throw him in there. I think BJ deserves this Gold Cup for his own personal career.
I'm kind of curious to see how he does, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. But I'm not. I don't think there was I think they truly are sitting down with him, saying, "All right, walk us through your plans." Like, this idea that everybody's pro Gregg Berhalter at U.S. Soccer is just not true. Now, they might say he was the best of the options given the time frame that we have and who was available and what money we have and all those types of things based on the data and the stats and all the things that we need to move forward. That's one thing. But there's no free pass for him. He is going to be under the microscope for the next few years. His job is not guaranteed. Maybe the money is, but the job is not guaranteed.
Dude, we're hosting the World Cup in 26. Yeah. He should be under the goddamn microscope. But
I agree. But what I'm saying about that is they do need to sit down with him and say, walk us through the plan. How do you plan to advance this team? Okay, how can we give you tools to make sure that you're held accountable or that you're putting the right team around you that is making sure you are thinking about things clearly to make the right decisions? Because we can't have another Netherlands. Now, don't get me wrong. Coaches either get tactics right or they get them wrong. They get the right lineup or they get it wrong. And it happens
That's
throughout
part-
your
that's part of the
entire
job.
career.
Of course.
That's part of it.
Of course.
You don't judge anybody based on one game, but when it's the biggest game of a tournament, you've got to look at that and say, that can't happen again. We've got to be better. That's also on the players, right? That's the players got to be better to beat the Netherlands. And so you should be sitting down with him and say, we didn't know who the coach was going to be. This 2-month window where they knew they were going to do them, or say 1-month window, or next month until September, to really map out what's it going to be, because we're not going to roll the dice. Again, the comments on coaches being hired generally, or people being hired on gut feeling, was the past. Now you have all kinds of
analysis,
data points and analysis to be able to, even players, right? Players aren't being recruited now on being like, well, he looks pretty good on the field. They're being like, well, what's his XG? What are his movements? What's his GPS saying? How fast can he run? How many minutes can he do? What's his injury history? You have this entire world now to be able to analyze a player and go, he's the right fit, or I'm not talking about the national team, or he's the wrong fit, right? Or his numbers just don't add up as a player, right? Or they do, and he's over indexing, and now we can get a good value on him. And so I think the initial window, which was a crap process, and I agree with that, should be to hold him accountable and sit down with him and be like, hey, now tell us and let us help you to make sure that we don't have a Netherlands happen again.
Well, his first big test is going to be Copa America in 2024. I know we have some friendlies leading up to that, but in terms of meaningful competition, that's where all eyes are going to be, especially with a big tournament being in the U.S. It's going to be a nice appetizer for the entree that is the World Cup in 2026. All right, we're going to take our second and last break of In Soccer We Trust. When we come back, Mexico's manager got fired. What? Only 5 months in charge, Diego Cocca. What happened? Don't go anywhere.
Phenomenal! Absolutely magisterial here! Artilharia do Campeonato Brasileiro! Colpisce ancora! Golazo!
All right, everybody, welcome back to In Soccer We Trust. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Heath Pearce and not Charlie Davies, because Charlie Davies, I don't know what's going on, Charlie Davies. We miss you. Come back soon, and hopefully he'll be back for Thursday's show. But let's get into the big news, Heath.
We should get T-shirts that say "Not Chuck Davies" on them. Because
I'm
not Chuck, you're not Chuck.
We should get a milk carton and have Chuck's face on the side of it missing from In Soccer We Trust. All right, so some dark days for Mexico. Not only did they get their asses slapped by the U.S. men's national team in a 3-0 loss in the Nations League semifinals, they did win the third place game, so they got that going for them, winning 1-0. And but that wasn't enough. They got the bronze medal. Diego Cocca has been announced as an ex-coach of Mexico, only 5 months in charge. He coached 7 games. He had 3 wins, 3 draws, and 1 loss. 10 goals for, 8 against. Not that great, Heath Pearce.
I love when something goes wrong. The picture selection that you put out is never like them celebrating a goal. It's always that, like, that is a proper frown. That's like literally somebody just whispered in his ear and was like, "You're fired." And now he's just sort of like staring off into the distance. But yeah, look, I think, his style of play doesn't fit. And actually, Herculez Gomez said it the other day, which was like his style of play doesn't fit the Mexican sort of DNA of the type of the team.
But we knew that when we got hired. I mean, this guy coached Atlas. He played ultimately a 5-3-2. How do you think the guy's going to come in and play? I mean, that's what had him lead Atlas to success and win their first trophy. I know he had a cup of coffee with Tigres before taking over Mexico, but there was only one style he was going to play that he's been sticking with throughout, and that's not the DNA of Mexico's national team. And so it was always going to play out this way, in my humble opinion.
Also,
I was just surprised that they fired him so quickly.
But also, like, that team was crap on the field, right? When you're playing US Mexico, we had a lot of tactics, but more than anything, it was just get out there and fight, compete for every ball. And the US ran all over them. And at no point did Mexico come to life in a pro-Mexico crowd in a way that felt like, oh no, the tides are, like, Jimmy, you and I both played Mexico, and those moments happen where you feel that shift and you're like, oh man, this was going really well. And now you can feel them leaning on us.
Yeah,
the
right,
crowd's
right.
into
That's
it.
true.
And you're
Good
like,
point.
dude, we've got to weather this for whether it's a minute or 20 minutes. It was like that was like a very tough thing. And they just had no energy to come out with that. So I think, again, smart on FMF to make the change early now, because you still got time to bring in whoever that next person is going to be. to get things on the right path. But I still look at that player pool, and Mexico's player pool is not what it once was.
No, it's not. No, 100%. I think what's interesting is that Jimmy Lozano has been named interim for Mexico for the Gold Cup. And I guess maybe they're taking notes from us that, hey, look, at an interim coach can have success. So we're going to throw some other guy out there and make it happen. And there's a great comment as well about, well, now Mexico can hire Pep and have Mourinho and Ancelotti as assistants, just because those guys are just going to be available for any team in North America national team that needs.
Tigres could do that. Tigres could afford bringing Pep in. You know, they spend everything they make, they spend. But the Mexican national team, I don't. Nah, come on now. Yeah,
it's interesting times for Mexico in particular. I think they have to take a real hard look at where they are and what they need to do, and they don't have as many players over in Europe. You know, and obviously that's been a big point of contention for them and their fans, for a long time. How do we get, and their journalists, like, how do we get more players playing over in Europe, playing in the biggest games? I know Chucky Lozano just won the Scudetto with Napoli, and Jimenez has been great in the Dutch league. Raul Jimenez, obviously, with that unfortunate head injury not too long ago, a year and a half ago, maybe. He's not been the same player since. Chicharito never gets called in. Carlos Vela doesn't seem interested. And it felt like maybe also, I think they relied on that older generation maybe a little bit longer than they should have. With I know Herrera still gets some looks, but Guardado in particular. And when you continue to rely on guys that are of a certain age, you know, maybe mid-30s, even older than that, you're taking away opportunities to blood other players and give them opportunities to step up and showcase themselves. We had to do that. We were forced to do that in 2018 when we didn't qualify. And obviously we've been benefiting from a great generation. But I actually think our infrastructure is pretty sound, and it's looking pretty good. And Mexico's not looking so great right now. So I'm kind of curious to see who they hire, obviously, first and foremost, and then what kind of changes are they going to make to their infrastructure overall, because it doesn't look great for them in the near future.
Yeah, and I think, again, the emergence of MLS academies has changed the dynamic of our player development, right? Almost every player now, outside of maybe call it Serginho Dest and Anthony Robinson, Christian Pulisic, I guess, pre-academy, have some sort of touch and feel through a player development system as being in young professional systems all the way through. Mexico also used to export a lot more, and they've got only a few players really pushing the envelope in Europe right now compared to the player pool that we have as young players, whether they started in MLS or not. And now the dual national approach has obviously been phenomenal for us and being able to bring Balogun. So they've just got a lot to fix, and sometimes that's a generational shift, and I don't think they really... That should have happened 3 years ago for Mexico, right?
Yeah,
and they've that entire window, like you said, of bringing players through. Maybe that's a developmental problem. Maybe that's again, relying too much on the veterans, or a combination of everything, including the domestic
and the young players not being good enough.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It actually feels like we might have to have a new rival, and it's not Mexico, it's Canada. So that'll be interesting. Now, John Herdman, the coach of Canada, he came out and said after this game against the U.S., he's vented some frustration with his federation. And he said, this is his quote, "We've got to get serious about winning a World Cup. When you play at home, you get a chance to win it. We've brought a World Cup to our country, and we're not serious about winning it. And you see how close that team is tonight. Tactically, we were there. Chances, shots, we were there. The margins were so tight tonight, so tight. We've got to get real and quick because these players, they deserve it." Now, to give you some context of where this frustration comes from, Canada only had a 4-day camp coming into this Nations League. And I think his frustration is starting from that, maybe some other things that we are unaware of, or stuff that's been coming out just due to the lack of support of the Canadian Federation. But they haven't won a trophy since 2000 when they won the CONCACAF Gold Cup. And they have the talent. This is a golden generation for them. So for them not to get that type of support, we've already seen it on the women's side for Canada, not getting necessarily the support that they deserve as well, given their quality and their success. That's
business,
tough.
though.
Yeah, Mexico's got some issues. Canada's got some issues, and I know that we rehired Gregg Berhalter, and that's creating its own issues. But it just feels like we're in a healthier place, and that feels awesome.
Yeah, but I agree. But it's a business, right? These are businesses. You've got to build the infrastructure, like where it comes from, commercial dollars, right? They need support in stadiums. They need commercial dollars. You need all. It's not just the federation taking money from youth sport and just being able to pay the men and women's first teams, right? It's youth team infrastructure. It's all those things. And it requires significant dollars to take
Right.
it serious. Now, winning the World Cup, I think that's I get that as a North Star. I think Canada are quite a ways off of that, as are the U.S. At this point. But there does need to be the federation recognizing we should probably take some cues from other federations that have advanced and moved forward based on the quality that we have on the men's and the women's side at the first team. Leverage that to get the dollars we need to take this more serious so that we can have longer camps, so we can have better player development, so we can have better player monitoring, so that we can build our youth national teams in a way that we're developing players. You've got the Canadian Premier League, you've got Major League Soccer connected to it all. Like, you need to be able to start building that infrastructure so that you can drive those dollars in, because it's not just like some like Mr. Canada writing a check to be like, well, either I'm going to write it or not. You have to have the funds to be able to do it. I don't know what their financial numbers are, but our umbrella within the U.S. soccer circles is able to pull dollars commercially as well as through the sport itself. That can help to fund all of these teams. But we also ran out of money in the last couple of years and need to rebuild those coffers. At one point, we were sitting on like 150 or 125, whatever that exact number is. Don't quote me on that, but that helped. Then it got depleted. We lost the developmental academy, which was a financial driver, and now the U.S. has to rebuild that after breaking off of Soccer United marketing towards 2026 to get the money to then advance the program forward.
Well, hopefully Copa America being on our shores will make a big difference as well. Obviously going to be pretty important competition for us, for Canada, and for Mexico. All three of us, of course, are hosting the World Cup in 2026. All right, Heath, final thoughts before we let everybody go. And as we start to prepare for Thursday's show, which is going to be a nice breakdown of the Gold Cup and our roster and our chances and more BJ Callahan, which is going to be awesome. Looking like a dad and needing some flip-flops for that tournament in particular. Final thought for me, and then I'll throw it over to you. We scored 5 goals against our two biggest rivals in CONCACAF over these 2 Nations League games, and we gave up 0. And that is what's up. I'm super excited about this group. I love their energy. I love their spirit, their enthusiasm, their desire to take risks, their desire to play on the front foot and to not take any shit. And that bodes so well. And I hope that obviously we take that energy and we share it with the team that's going to be representing us at the Gold Cup as well. And again, we'll talk about that on Thursday. Final thought from you, Heath Pearce.
Yeah, I think it's probably in a similar vein. Like, I am not pro Gregg Berhalter. I'm not a Gregg Berhalter disciple, but what I do know, and having spent my entire career in systems that with coaches that I didn't pick and environments that I didn't create, is that at a certain point, we've got to get on board with just supporting this national team moving forward, right? It's fine. You can dislike him all you want. But for us, I think the more that we support this team on heading towards home soil, hold him to a high standard, hold the players to a high standard, the better it's going to be, because I like the positive. I live in the vibes-based economy, Jimmy. You know, that's how I transact, and we need the vibes. And so,
well, I always knew you were the Christian Roldan of the show, so that's not a big surprise.
It's just my final thought is I'm going to keep on pushing that narrative because I like positivity, and when there's time to be negative, let's do that. When it's time to be critical, let's do that. But let's not just like blow it up for no reason.
Right now, though, it's time to celebrate because that was a hell of a performance from the guys over 2 games. Congratulations to them once again for winning the CONCACAF Nations League. And we'll see you guys on Thursday. Thank you for listening and watching In Soccer We Trust. On behalf of producer Des, producer Alex, Chuck Wagon, Hollywood, and Conrad Dino, we thank you again for all the love and support. We'll see you in a couple days. Later.